Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the physical geography of the U.S. and Canada. So we're going to look at a lot of different landforms. We're also going to look at a lot of different bodies of water and waterways, and there's going to be a lot to talk about. So let's get this started. So the land. So we're going to start on the west coast, and we're going to work our way east with this section of notes here. So the collisions between tectonic plates are going to thrust up a series of mountain ranges. So starting over here in the south, okay, we have the Sierra Nevada, all right, and then we're going to move up to the Cascade Range, and then we're going to move up into the coastal ranges, okay, so that's these up here, and then the Alaska Range, and we're going to go all the way up, and part of the Alaska Range is going to be Mount McKinley. Mount McKinley is the highest point in North America. It's also sometimes called Denali, okay, but it's the highest point in North America. And then to the west of that is going to be the Great Basin. Okay, so it's going to kind of slope down, and then it's going to rise up again into the Rocky Mountains. Okay, so the Rocky Mountains start in Alaska, which is way up here, and go all the way down into New Mexico. And then you have dry basins and plateaus, like I said, that fill the area between these two ranges, and they're very, very dry, okay? So they're very dry through here, a lot of deserts and that. And then you go on the opposite side of the Rockies, and you have the Great Plains. The Great Plains are very dry too, but not nearly as dry as what's going on over here. So remember, we talked about that orographic effect that's happening. So the wind comes in, it comes off, and this area all through here is pretty rainy, okay? It's pretty wet. But once you get on the opposite side of those mountain ranges, it becomes very, very dry. Okay, so that's why this area is dry. Okay, so from the Rockies, the land slopes down and it hits what's called the Mississippi River Valley. Okay, so it slopes down into central lowlands. We live obviously in the Mississippi River Valley. And then in the north, the edge of the Canadian Plains sits what's called the Canadian Shield. So the Canadian Shield is this right here, okay? And it's a giant core of rock that's centered on the Hudson and the James Bays, okay? So you can see right here, this is it, and right in the middle, that's the Hudson Bay right there. So this right here is called the Canadian Shield, and it's just rock, it's solid rock. This is what it looks like here. And then east of the Mississippi, the land's going to rise again slowly until it creates the Appalachian Mountain, or until it gets to the Appalachian Mountains. Those were formed by powerful upheavals within the Earth's crust. Okay, so what happened is the Earth buckled and went up, and then after the Appalachian Mountains, it goes down into a coastal lowland out to the east of the mountains, and then out to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so I'm going to show you on a map here what that looks like going west to east. Okay, so this is what it looks like. So we have high mountain ranges, and then it's more low here, and then it goes really up with the Rocky Mountains. Okay, and remember, Mount McKinley, it's like way up here on this map. But then it slopes down, Mississippi River Valley here, and then it comes back up with the Appalachians, and then it goes back down into coastal lowland, and then out to the ocean. Okay, so a lot of up and down. Now, islands. So there's several islands that we're going to talk about. So start with Hawaii. So Hawaii was created by volcanic forces. So there are 8 major islands of Hawaii, but 124 minor islands. And what happened is there's volcanoes underneath all this, okay? And what happens is those volcanoes erupt, and when that lava hits the water, it cools down and becomes hard. Okay, and so then it just kind of forms a mountain almost. Well, it does form a mountain, and then that just keeps happening, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger each time it erupts. And then you get, once those mountains break the surface of the water, that's when you start to see islands. Okay, and so these islands, you can see there's much more to it than what you actually see on a map. Okay, so you can see that these are huge mountains that have broke through the surface of the water. Okay, now the Aleutian Islands, those are off the coast of Alaska. The Aleutian Islands are also volcanic islands. On the other side of the continent, we have continental islands. Now, these are part of the continental shelf, but that had been, parts of it are still submerged, but these are the parts that are obviously not submerged. So, for example, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, and Manhattan Island, those are all examples of continental islands. Water systems. So many freshwater lakes and rivers, many in North America. So there's a high ridge of the Rockies, and this is called the Continental Divide. You can see this in this picture here. And basically what it does is anything east of the divide, the water, east of the divide's over here, the water flows towards either the Arctic Ocean, so up north, up toward the Arctic Ocean, it flows towards the Hudson Bay, or it flows towards the Atlantic or the Mississippi River basin, which flows out to the Gulf of Mexico. So everything on this side flows basically in an easterly direction. Everything on this side, on the west side, flows in a westerly direction. Okay, so west of the divide, it usually flows out to the Pacific Ocean. So the Colorado and the Rio Grande have what are called headwaters, which is a source in the Rockies. Okay, so a headwater is basically little streams that come together and then they create a river. Okay, so what happens there? Water always goes downhill. So water collects in the mountains and then it flows downhill and then it goes down into the Colorado River or the Rio Grande. And then tributaries are smaller rivers or streams that connect to a larger river. So let me give you an example of this. So you're looking right here at the Mississippi. Okay, so this right here is the Missouri, which is actually probably a bigger river than Mississippi, but this is a tributary because it flows into the Mississippi. You got the Ohio here, does the same thing. These are all tributaries of the Mississippi River. Okay. So the Mississippi River starts in Minnesota. Okay, starts up here. And at the very beginning of it, it's a stream so narrow that you can jump across it. Okay, but it starts in Minnesota and then goes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. If you think of like the river that we see here in St. Louis and think if you can jump across that, you're crazy. But the Mississippi River and its tributaries touch 31 states. In the eastern U.S., they have what's called the fall line. This marks where the highland of the Piedmont Hills along the Appalachian drop into the coastal plain. So when we're talking about that drop down into the coastal plain east of the Appalachians there, that's the fall line. The St. Lawrence River that's in the north. I don't have a map of that. But it goes from Lake Ontario all the way down to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So it goes through Quebec, Montreal, and Ottawa. And those are major cities in Canada. And then Niagara Falls sits, it's like right here. Okay, Niagara Falls is on the Niagara River, and it forms a border between the U.S. and Canada. And it is a major source of hydroelectric power. This right here is Niagara Falls. Okay. Northern Canada, there's glacial dams that created the Great Bear Lake and the Great Slave Lake, and then glaciers gouged into the Canadian Shield, to create the Great Lakes. Okay, so as we learned in the last unit, these lakes, the Great Lakes, were created by glacial erosion. Now, coal and iron can be found in this area, and so it has fueled industry a lot in this area. And so we've even built canals to connect to, like the Erie Canal, for example, connects Lake Erie all the way over to the Hudson. Okay, so it's easier to ship goods ship resources to this area to get to New York City, which is just down here. Okay. Natural resources, so fossil fuels and minerals, so important energy resources are petroleum, coal, and natural gas, and these are known as fossil fuels. And they're called fossil fuels because they are made from buried plant and animal remains from previous geologic periods, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years ago. Okay, so basically what happened is, like, there was a dinosaur, and he died, and he's been dead so long that he is kind of liquefied into oil. Okay, and that's what we have been taking out of of the ground, and we've been putting into our cars to make them go fast. Mineral resources are also plentiful. So both of these are non-renewable resources. So that means that there is a finite amount of fossil fuels and mineral resources. But in North America, there's a lot of gold, silver, copper, iron, nickel, all kinds of different mineral resources. Now, timber and fishing, these are what are called renewable resources. We can always plant more trees. We can always make more fish. Well, fish can make more fish, but there is a way to get more of those, okay? So timber is a vital resource, and that's, like I said, renewable, and then efforts have been made to replace those that were cut for lumber. There's been a big push in the last, 30 years to replant the lumber companies to replant, and they want to anyway, because that means that they are making more money because they're able to replace the resources that they have gone through. And then we have waterways that are very rich with fish. So some places there's fisheries. These are places that are specifically for catching fish and then other sea animals. And then aquaculture has developed, and this is similar to agriculture, but it's aquaculture because it's basically fish farming. And so you can see there's places around where you'll see big rectangles of water, and those are fishery, or that's aquaculture. Okay, there's fish in there, and they're farming them to be sold for, fish sticks, or you go and get some tilapia at the restaurant or whatever. Okay, there's a lot of that going on. Climate and vegetation. So we've talked about this already, but we'll get more into this here. So in the southern climates, there's the subtropical, tropical, desert, and Mediterranean climates. In the southeast United States, it is rainy with long, muggy summers and mild winters. In Florida, there's the Everglades, and that's like a series of swamp areas. The Florida Everglades shelter a great variety of vegetation. So because it's very swampy, it's very wet, there's a lot of different plants and animals that live in there. Hurricanes do hit along the Gulf of Mexico, down here, and along the Atlantic coast. So there's quite a few hurricanes that hit in this region, from Texas to Florida, and then from Florida all the way up to New York. New York's had hurricanes before. So that's certainly a major natural disaster that can occur in those areas. Southwest United States, we talked about the rain shadow effect. So that keeps the plateaus and the basins between right in this area very, very dry. Okay, so you can see it's very dry here, and then this is where Death Valley is down in here. It's in California, and the highest temperature ever recorded in the Earth ever is 134 degrees, and that happened in Death Valley. In the central and southern California, they have Mediterranean climate. So as we're moving farther north, they get mild, wet winters and hot, dry summers. And the vegetation there is chaparral. So that's like medium-sized scrubs, or Mediterranean scrubs. But they're not real big bushes, but they're not real small like things you would find in the desert. Okay, so they're kind of shrub. They're like medium-sized shrubs. So this right here is a better map of the climates of the U.S. and Canada. So as we get into Canada, you can see it gets colder and colder because Canada goes all the way north. So we get into this right here is a subarctic, and then we get into the tundra, the frozen tundra, and then the polar ice cap is on the very, very top. And you can see there's bits of that polar ice cap in there in the tundra. So humid continental climate, this is where we live. We have very cold winters, very hot, dry summers, and hot, humid summers, not dry. And the Great Plains and the prairies, very violent spring and summer thunderstorms. So sometimes we have what are called supercells, and those can spawn into tornadoes. So in the springtime, there can be quite a few tornadoes. Some areas of the Great Plains get less rain, and then they have a steppe climate. The highland climate in the Rockies and the Pacific ranges. So there's what's called a timberline or tree line, and anything above that, trees can't grow. It's too high. It's too cold. The trees just cannot grow. In early spring, there's a phenomenon called the Chinook. And this is a warm, dry wind that blows down the easterly slopes. And what it does is it melts the snow, and that snow runs down into the valleys. The water of the snow runs into the valleys. And then the marine west coast from northern Canada to southern northern California, to southern Alaska is marine west coast. And the mountain barriers force warm, wet ocean air upward. So we talked about, once again, the orographic effect. So it rains on the one side of the mountain, but then on the opposite, it's very, very dry. Okay, so when we're talking like Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, going up north, all of that is marine west coast. All right, so this once again is the orographic effect, and so you can see that the water hits. It doesn't get as high as the mountain is, so all the air goes through, but all the water's coming out. Okay, so the air goes through, and it's very dry on this side. And you can see this right here would be what's called the timberline. So this is where trees can grow, but it's too cold. It's too it's conditions are not suitable up here for growth of trees. Okay, high latitude climates. So the subarctic, in the subarctic region, they have very frigid winters, so it can get down to minus 70 degrees. And we talked about this with the climate project. This is the subarctic has the largest range of temperatures, but they have very high atmospheric pressure that causes cold winds to chill much of the U.S. in winter. And sometimes, oftentimes in this area, you get blizzards. Blizzards is anything where it's heavy snow with winds of more than 35 miles per hour for 3 hours or more. Okay, so I'm sure like in the wintertime, there's always pictures of, on the internet of people opening their door and there's just a wall of snow. Okay, that is caused by those blizzards that we're talking about. And then the tundra, so in like Newfoundland, Yukon Territory, and the coast of Greenland is where we see the tundra. They have coniferous and deciduous forests, but they have bitter cold winters and cool summers. And then the interior parts of Greenland have the ice cap climate. And then the uppermost part of what's Nunavut is what this is, that territory of Canada has ice cap climate as well. All right, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Don't forget to do your homework. It's the acrostic. Great Lakes is the word. Make sure you write complete sentences, and make sure you do every single letter. All right? I hope you guys all have a good day.